It's so hard to quantify, but in terms of like Dexter's performance in particular, like it's literally exactly like you said on Twitter, like fucking hell, he has to focus on like 20 things and like adapt to a new environment very, very quickly. It's got to be fucking hard to do, and he's already like adapting pretty quickly. So.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Geographically Challenged. Some might say this one is a little bit late, but I didn't actually specify a start time. So for the uninitiated, there is one man that led us to be late. And it's not the guy that's having camera issues right now, which would actually be Bleh. And he is normally the culprit when it comes to
fuck off,
forcing us to be late. But it was actually our wonderful guest, Benkai, aka Eggs Benkai, who is now a professional Valheim streamer. He's quit CSGO, and the only reason he actually managed to get onto this show is because he subscribed to my Twitch channel for 2 months in a row. Anyway, we're here to talk about Asian CS, or what's left of Asian CS, or maybe more specifically, what's leaving Asian CS, because there seems to be a mass exodus going on since 2020. Obviously, we've got Pili and Bleh back as per normal. And we've got a fairly stacked episode, so let's jump straight into things. Obviously, you guys all know who Benkai is, or was. He was a player for Paper Rex in Counter-Strike, is now a player for Paper Rex in Valorant. He not only killed Southeast Asian CS, but he also killed the career of 5 young Valorant players that were playing under the Paper Rex brand. Who's playing it?
It's gotta be Bleh.
It's gotta be Bleh with the graveyard. But it is true. It is true. You not only killed the Paper Rex Valorant team in order to take their spot, but you also have killed Southeast Asian Counter-Strike. So if you want to hear more about Benkai's escapades, you can watch my In Retrospect with Benkai, which I did about a month and a half ago, or a couple of months ago. And we talked about all the great achievements he's had in Counter-Strike. Now we have to see what kind of achievements he can have in Valorant. So basically the TLDR is, if you haven't seen, obviously Paper Rex has moved their entire team from Counter-Strike over to Valorant. They've let go of their old Valorant team in the process. And basically in doing so, they have, in a way, become the last bastion of Southeast Asian CS to fall. I feel like there isn't really anyone else worth talking about still. Maybe you can make an argument that there's like Sigma still kicking around, Huatsai still kicking around, but these teams were quite clearly not at the same level of at least professionalism that the likes of Beyond and Paper Rex and some of the teams before them were, like Lucid Dream, etc. So for me, it almost is kind of the death sentence for ESEA, especially considering this Paper Rex roster was a team that just won the Extremesland Southeast Asia division. So they were arguably the number one team in the region upon their exit. So, look, I guess first I want to get the perspective of Pili and Bleh. I think we're actually going to get some conflicting opinions here, maybe. And then we'll go to Benkai and, you know, he can sort of give us his TLDR as to why this move has happened. So, Pili, what was your sort of initial thoughts on this when you sort of heard that Paper Rex was going to be leaving, and then when it was confirmed that they made that move over to Valorant?
It's kind of like disappointing because I feel like Paper Rex had like a CS team for such a long time, or like at least a couple of months, and was kind of struggling to do anything, wasn't really making it through the open qualifiers of a lot of tournaments and things like that. And we wanted to see them in like top 4 tournaments, but the whole time period where they played, apart from like a Perfect World or something like that, for some reason, all the TOs were just making only top 4 tournaments, and 3 out of 4 of those were invites only, which made it very hard for anyone to sort of break into the top tier of Asia. Yeah, almost impossible, really, unless you're going to win literally every game in an open qualifier, which, you know, some teams did, but especially when you lump that in with like Mongolian teams and things like that, like it's not just qualifying through ESEA and winning an ESEA closed qualifier. So even after winning Extremesland, my kind of thought was like, oh, I'd like to see them now go into some of these open qualifiers and actually win them over the Thai teams or Mongolian teams or whoever, and play in some closed qualifier tournaments if there are any, and see how they go against Chinese teams before I 100% am like satisfied. But we just never get to see the redemption arc, unfortunately.
Got any 2 cents to throw in here, Bleh? I know you're Singapore CS's #1 fan.
I was for the longest time. It's kind of sad for me. I want to just like go back a few years. The first teams that really started casting like 2013, 2014, where teams like BF Nut, where it was Impression playing there. Then we had the guys from Bovines. Alex was playing in that lineup, old school Singaporean guy. So it's kind of sad for me to see, like, with Paper Rex closing doors, it will be pretty much signaling the end of Southeast Asian Counter-Strike. Sure, you have Xcurate and Impression still playing around, like I mentioned, a couple of teams here and there, but the glory days of pulling my hair out and wanting to pretty much off myself watching some of those games, it's over, which makes me sad because deep down inside I did love it. Have to agree with Pilsky. I would love to see how Paper Rex did fare against the Chinese and Mongolian guys. Tiger, we have some of the D13 boys, Invictus, Vici, Tyloo. That would have been fun to watch, but I kind of, I mean, it's also being optimistic, right? If you're an optimistic man, you want to see it, but from a business standpoint, I can see why you want to kind of jump in when the ship really hasn't sailed yet. Unlike how it happened in Counter-Strike, where Asian CS started off very late, and right now we have so many teams transitioning over to Valorant. The game is still kind of finding its legs. So I do understand from their perspective, from Nick's perspective, from Paper Rex's as an org's perspective, and from the perspective of all the teams in the region, all the Thai teams especially, the way they've switched over, why they've done it. It is disappointing, but I do understand. It's like just a sad breakup where you just know it's not meant to be, but it is what it is.
Yeah, maybe more like a long distance relationship or something where you really get along with the other person or something like that, but you can't quite find a way to bridge the gap, and eventually you kind of have to cut your losses, and you're like, well, what could have been? What could have been, Benkai? Now, I have a question for you. Obviously, we want to sort of involve you in this discussion as Bleh goes back to black and white.
Passed over.
Yeah, like, I don't even know. This is the most scuffed...
dead with the rest of the SEA.
Scuffed show we've had.
I don't even know.
What are you even doing?
It's like a ghost in the machine is I think it's the spirit of Southeast Asian Counter-Strike. It's just haunting me right now. I've gone like black and white. Half of my head has disappeared. It's like
lag or something. Anyway, whatever.
It's all gone to shit. Yeah.
Yeah, everything's gone to shit. Even geographically challenged. There we go again. Okay, so Benkai, my first question to you is, why would you leave Counter-Strike, being one of the top teams in the Southeast Asia region, only to then move to Valorant and be a worse Valorant player than Pili? What possible reason would you have for wanting to do that?
Okay. I mean, everything kind of stems back to maybe right before 2021, so maybe last December. So the company basically told us, they approached us and was like, hey, you guys are not really winning anything. We need to see some results, right? So they kind of gave us an ultimatum and went like, if you guys don't win any events in the upcoming month, like January, because in January we were scheduled to have maybe 3 tournaments. So if we didn't win at least one of those, that we will be, all of us will be put on the transfer list, or we'll just like stop. They'll just stop having us on the lineup, basically. Yeah. So we went ahead and won Extreme Plan. But after that, Nick basically approached us and was like, I mean, obviously they were happy and we were all also happy as well. But we slowly started not enjoying the time that we spent practicing in Counter-Strike. Like, yeah, we had that sense of achievement in winning Extreme Lands, but I mean, people weren't feeling exactly as motivated as before. Yeah, so, and they weren't really like putting their 100% into it, because as you know, like we have like Davai and Forsaken in like the top 10 leaderboards of Valorant in APAC, so they didn't really also put like the 100% of the time in CS. So I'm kind of happy that we did win Extreme Lands, but also I guess I kind of saw it coming. So even after winning Extreme Lands, the management still came to speak to us, and they spoke to us individually and told us that, hey, like if we had to see it from a business point of view, because they weren't making any money and they were spending like a considerable amount on the lineup, and they were proposing salary cuts for us. Like they were willing to support us in Counter-Strike if we wanted to play on, but that would come at the cost of having our salaries cut, which we were kind of okay with, but at the same time, I already kind of knew that everyone else didn't really want to play Counter-Strike anymore. So, like, out of the blue, one of us just brought up, hey, why don't we move to Valorant? Like, Valorant, sorry. Yeah.
Who was it? Who was it?
Name and shame. Name and shame.
I'm not sure. It kind of felt like it just came out of nowhere, and everyone just kind of agreed, like, hey, shit, you're right. You know, because the Valorant is new. And I mean, everyone else is like maybe a few months ahead of us, but I don't think the region is that hard to catch up with. I mean, sure, there's like a learning curve, but it wouldn't take as much because a lot of the fundamentals from Counter-Strike ports over to Valorant at the same time. It's just the abilities and stuff that we have to learn. So we were open to that idea. And at the same time, the Valorant team that was already under contract with Paper Rex, their contract just ended. So it wasn't us booting them out, but it was more like we were just taking their place. It was more like it was pretty good timing that when their contracts ended, then we moved in to take their place. Yeah, so we've been, I think this is our second week practicing, and it's been going okay. Yeah, but as like in my role, I'm still the IGL, so it's, in my perspective, it's a bit harder to call in Valorant because in CS, everyone has the same utility, right? So you can literally tell everyone to like what you want to do in terms of throwing grenades and stuff. But in Valorant, you need to take into mind like each individual hero and their abilities and how you want to call around that. So it bumps up the difficulty of calling by a bit, but I'm slowly managing. Yeah.
Plus, you have no crutches to go back to. I mean, you've been playing CS for forever, but brand new game. There's no like, oh, we can just go back to this default that I know has been working for like a bunch of years, or I know that you always play this kind of style on this map. You have to scrap everything and start again almost.
Yeah. It kind of makes me sad, but I'm also enjoying the challenge. So.
I wanted to ask you how practice is compared to CS, because I know that there's a lot of like people who I knew weren't really playing as much CS anymore that I see playing Valorant. Do you get better practice on Valorant than you do in CS?
Right now in Valorant, I would say it's a lot easier to get practice. Like we could literally book practice for the entire week. We could pre-book all of our practice matches in the following weeks and stuff. So it's a lot easier compared to Counter-Strike. So after we left, because Alex is in like a WeChat group for finding scrims and stuff for Counter-Strike. So right now it's just we're only looking at asking questions, NG. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's only them that's just finding practice. So I'm not sure how the state of CS is right now in SEA, but I can't imagine it's good.
From your scrim like say Chinese teams or anything like that, or Mongolian teams?
In Counter-Strike, we do sometimes, but not. I don't think they find scrims as often as other teams. Yeah, so like maybe in a week we would get them maybe twice.
Right.
From the similar but a different perspective, Ben. Have you had a chance to scrim against the Koreans in Valorant yet? And how was it playing against them, if you have?
Yes, and we got fisted.
Feels good.
That's good. That's good to know, though. It's good to know that there is a high level of Valorant, at least in Asia right now.
Oh, the Koreans are insane. They might legitimately be world class. Like people literally steal their strats. EU and NA teams steal their strats.
They do. Yeah.
When I watch the NA teams and EU teams and I look at their aim, I'm like, these guys aren't going to be the Koreans, man. That's why I wanna see so badly them like the Koreans going up against the other guys. But
I guess
I feel like what they get right is because we played so we scrimmed against Newton. That's Solo's team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he had, I guess he brought that very 1.6 slow style approach to it, and it really like I think gave us a lot of trouble because like number one we're new, but number two it's just like really annoying to play against someone with that kind of experience. Like he knows how to play with your rotations and stuff. So I guess that's why Korean CS might be above, like a tier above Asia in general, because they also have like this very tiny executes like around the map that just like that's very well rehearsed. So basically you can't really just do anything about it when they do it to you. So I guess that's one thing that they have like above everyone else right now in the world, actually, I think.
I guess that kind of leads into my next sort of line of questioning, which is what is your expectation actually for Valorant? Obviously, as a team, you said you've got a couple of your players already are in the top 10 for APAC. Now, I'm not a huge Valorant follower, so correct me if I'm wrong, but that includes Japan and Korea in that APAC listing as well, right? Or no?
No.
So
Korea and Japan have their own
server
tournaments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So APAC includes Southeast Asia and OCE.
I think so. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. But okay, that I suppose aside, what would you expect, domestically within Asia? Are you hoping to maybe be, let's say, a top 5 team, top 3 team, top 1 team? Obviously, you want to play internationally as well. I mean, in relation to what you were able to achieve in CS, where do you think the limit is for Paper Rex in Valorant? Are you going to be perhaps a better team in Valorant than what you were in CS? Because let's be real, at the end of the day, even back in the boot days, right? Like the best result was playing internationally and probably getting knocked out in like the first couple of rounds of an international tournament against the European team. So can you go further than that in Valorant? Basically, I guess is my TLDR question.
I'll say definitely, yeah. I mean, one of the main reasons we went into Valorant was because it was actually realistic enough for us to be top 1 in Asia, at least. But of course, the goal is to be top 1 in the world, right? But the first step is Asia, and when we saw the competition that's currently in the pool now, we are like, this actually like very doable, because we look at all these current like top teams, right? They're basically made up of like a bunch of guys who didn't really have much of an impact in Counter-Strike, and they ported over. So they brought all of their bad habits along with them into that game as well. So when we practice against some of these guys, we saw a lot of like individual peeking and stuff, not using a lot of teamwork. Like the fundamentals from CS just didn't port it over. But for us, we brought over all of the teamwork stuff, and we already like started getting decent results against like all of these like top teams. And so far we've mostly been winning, but until we met like the Koreans. So the Koreans right now are pretty tough, and we played absolute Jupiter as well, like the current top team in Japan, and we flawed them. And I'm not sure
it's
why.
Just like CS then, so
I do have a question there. Like in addition to that, do you think overall I know it's still very early right now, but the overall practice environment in Asia as a whole is much better than it ever was in Counter-Strike already? Because you have the Koreans, they we all know that they are a team who we want to see them play against the EU guys, and they are really good. So do you feel like already you have a lot? You don't have to necessarily leave Asia, like how it was in Counter-Strike, to get good practice. It's different here.
Yeah, it's kind of comforting to know that, but also because I feel like the skill gap between all of these teams are actually the skill gap is so small, because it doesn't take a lot to be very good at the game when you take into account mechanics and stuff. I mean, yeah, you need to have like a degree of understanding of your abilities to take that even further, but I feel like the shooting mechanics and movement in general is very forgiving to someone who maybe isn't as good as he was in Counter-Strike, if you take, for example. Yeah, so
I mean, look
when
at
we-
Pilsky, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Already.
No wonder he can hit top 500.
That's not even a joke though. Like you can literally, you know, I mean they just nerf Stinger, but you can literally use like a Stinger or an Odin. Like you don't even have to use a rifle and you can find like decent success sometimes, and even just the rifle aim and stuff like that. But even not even just talking like CS mechanics and stuff. Like you even just look at the state of ranked and stuff like that. You'll see like top NA players on their streams just getting absolutely stomped by some bloke no one's ever heard of. Like mechanically, you know, it's almost like you could get absolutely domed by anyone.
Is there a world where for you, Benkai, you sort of... I've forgotten my train of thought here, to be honest. I was trying to save it while I was talking, but I can't remember what I was going to say. What was I going to say? Oh, okay. Yeah, here we go. So do you have any like level of ego, right? You come across from CS, right? You yourself were one of the top players in CS in Asia at one point. So do you come into Valorant and you go like, okay, all these fucking noobs, they've already swapped over. Like we were way better than these guys in CS. Like you were clearly better than the absolute squad in CS. Let's just put that out there. And yet they go across to Valorant and they're like the #1 Valorant team. Everyone's fucking hyped this shit about Japanese Valorant, whatever. I'm here on Geographically Challenge like 6 months ago saying, look, these guys, they might be good, but they're not going to be the best in Asia. Do you have that same kind of level of ego? Do you come in and go, we're just going to shit on these kids and it doesn't really matter what they say or what their rep is or anything like that? Like, they need to remember we were the best in CS. And do you think that translates across then into Valorant as well?
Nah, because I think when we were discussing about moving to Valorant, right? Alex basically told us that if we were to move over, we had to park all of our egos at the door because it's gonna be a new game for us. And I mean, it's good to have like because again, some of these Counter-Strike guys, right, are the guys that we've beaten like time and time again in CS. So it's good to have that level of like mental block. So right now there's for the like Indo side, the Indonesian side of things, when someone sees like Forsaken in the server, they're all like, oh fuck, is that the guy again that we keep getting smashed by in rank?
Yep.
And it's the same for Davai also. So it's good to have that level of like I don't know if I should call it fear or respect, like either or, but it's good to have that level of
Reputation maybe would be the right word, I think.
Yeah, reputation when we
Fear,
come into like
respect.
when we come into scrims and stuff. So maybe you don't get as many teams just like disrespecting us and just like rushing us every round or something. I mean that's nice to have, but basically everyone else, like we just came into it knowing that we are definitely gonna get like shit on the first few weeks, and it was all gonna be part of the learning experience because at the end of the day we're all gonna like learn from it in order to like play catch up with these guys, and it wasn't gonna take long until we get up to that level. So we're all okay with it. So everyone's like in a pretty good learning attitude right now. Like we're all enjoying the scrims more than CS, I guess. I would say, yeah.
Okay. I don't really have any more questions for the Valorant topics, unless Pili and Bleh have any more. We can move on.
Nah,
No,
we shouldn't.
really.
We shouldn't derail this into a Valorant podcast. We should keep it down.
I mean,
to what
look,
it is.
at this point, there isn't going to be much Asian CS to talk about. So I feel like in the next 5 or 6 episodes, this is going to go from being a purely Asian CS podcast to perhaps being a bit of a Valorant CS mix. We'll see how we go. But
An Asian AU FPS
yeah.
esports.
All I'm saying
broadcast.
is, I think it's getting to the point where it's harder and harder to fill an episode worth of topics with just Asian CS when it really is only China and Mongolia at this point. Won't have any more Paper Rex to talk about unless we keep talking about them in Valorant. And besides, it will be quite enjoyable, at least from my perspective, to catch up with what the Korean guys are doing, what the Japanese guys are doing, and, you know, seeing how that's all sort of developing. Even anecdotally, I was talking to someone from the Philippines a couple of days ago, and she said to me, like, Valorant has revived the FPS scene in the Philippines. Like, it literally, there was fucking one team in CS, and they never really got anything done, but everyone's playing Valorant. So, look, maybe...
Dude, I even had a Filipino guy in one of my games the other day.
Yeah.
Just randomly, and he's like playing on 170 ping and actually kind of okay.
Like, maybe it's time to finally bite the bullet and just be like, fuck it, you know, it's the sign of the times.
Hey, if this means, honestly, I'm not one of those. Like, oh, I'm gonna CS better than Valorant, whatever. I feel like both of them can coexist. But to see Asia, I wouldn't say they're doing well yet because we haven't seen them play the top EU and A teams, but to see a healthy scene that's growing organically, although I do have a few criticisms of the way it's being handled overall by TOs and whatnot. I'm all for it, man. I would love to see a Korean, Japanese, Singaporean team, for example, be a top 3 team in the world. That would be fucking fantastic, especially in a game which is so similar to the one game we all love. So yeah, fuck it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I'll take it. Better than nothing, right? Obviously, this is still a Counter-Strike podcast, though, so we do want to draw it back a little bit and start talking about Counter-Strike a little bit more than Valorant. And in happier times, or happier news, we've seen a couple of the Aussie teams and players going overseas to Katowice and performing, I would say, pretty well as a whole. Now, Benkai, I don't know how much of this you specifically watched. I'm assuming probably not a whole lot because you were streaming Valheim all night while those games were going. So, yeah, probably haven't got too much to add here. But I think we've got some questions that we can send in your direction, maybe just to add some flavor. But first, obviously, let's talk about Renegades. You know, they obviously just added Alistair. We've spoken about that. They've moved Malta over to the IGL role. And this was their first, not only their first time with that roster actually playing, like we didn't get to see them play in ANZ at all this year with that team. But it's also the first time that they've gone overseas in like 12 months, basically. I looked at it. And the last time that they played overseas was actually at Katowice last year. And that was at like the 23rd or the 24th or something like that of February. So yeah, it's basically nearly a year to the day. Not quite. It's about a year to the week. But I was actually pretty happy with their performances. Just to run through, it was a 16-14 loss to Mouz, which obviously had Dexter. So that's a discussion in itself. A 2-1 win over Team 1. And then a 0-2 against Virtus Pro in the elimination qualification match. So let's talk about the Mouz game. Obviously, Dexter versus his old squad. So there is that. I thought Renegades looked pretty okay there. I thought that they did have a little bit of a luxury by starting on the CT side of Inferno compared to the T side. I think they ended up winning something like 3 rounds on the T side of Inferno. Malta had a pretty good game. He won a 1v1 against Dexter as well. So ding dong, the king is dead. Long live the king. But at the end of the day, when you're going up against the likes of Frozen, Rops, and Acor, you kind of just get cunted on, and there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. Although, they could have won that. I will say, there was some pretty big moments in that where you sort of saw those poor habits or maybe the nerves of playing the international sort of circuit once again coming through, particularly that last round where they were looking for 15-15. You know, that 2v2, I think, Blair, is probably the one that you're talking about that probably should have been winnable for Renegades.
Apart from that as well, like that was obvious. It's a 2v2, the bomb's taking away and unnecessary panicky peaks coming in there from in that 2v2 scenario. And this is after they converted, I think it was like a 2v4 or 2v3. They made it very winnable and they kind of threw that away. But even taking that aside, we had moments where there was so many individual plays coming in from the players of Renegades, something which we've seen from them. We've seen them do in Oceania where, like, we all agree they don't get punished enough. And then when you have players like Rops, like all these guys, like what's his face, Acor, for example, with an AWP just popping off, it's going to be always hard. You're always going to get punished. But I feel like they were to blame. Clear flaws in their approach to the game, which was seen especially against Team 1, for example. I feel they should have won that way more convincingly. Against VP was just clearly the better team. I mean, there's not much of a breakdown there. But there were good signs for me personally. Like, Ince and Sicko were able to hold their own. They were looking good individually at the very least. It's just tragic that they relied too much on the individualism instead of just sticking to the game plan. And a bit of nerves coming in as well. Can't really blame them. It was going to be hard. A year, you know, playing in Oceania, you finally make it back to EU for a tournament like Katowice, which is just like the best teams in the world playing there, and you're playing without your oldest in IGL. You know, the guy who we wanted to see them play with in EU. So it was going to be hard anyway. But overall, I was okay with that showing. It wasn't terrible.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with what the result actually ended up being for them. I think going against Virtus Pro is a pretty difficult draw.
For anyone.
Yeah, like I guess exactly. Like that could have been anyone, and you're probably wrecked. So I guess they did as well as they could have. Pilski, what have you got to add when it comes to Renegades, at least, and they're running Katowice? I know we were talking a little bit about Alistair in that Mouz game where we thought maybe he looked a little bit uncomfortable first time playing overseas in what felt like a very, very long time. But I mean, I didn't watch the Team 1 game, I will say that much, but just based on the stats, he seemed to sort of turn that around on the second best of, or the first best of 3 that they played, but the second game that they played. So, I mean, is that a discussion point for you, or are you just happy with Renegades in general, or what's your consensus on their run?
I have no idea. Like we've seen like 2 series from them in the best of 1, and I still can't really make my mind up. Like the best of 1, we'll start off with that on Inferno. Like they had a pretty good run on CT side, and Malta had one of those games where like he's in like international. Reminds me of like the minor, where he's like, I'm just dropping 30 or 40 this game. Like, you know, when he's playing in OS, he's like almost kind of lifeless. I feel like he couldn't get the hype going, but when he was like going international, he's one of those players that like actually fires up and starts to play better sometimes. And he had one of those maps, and they still couldn't get it across the line. I think focusing on the 2-on-2 post plant, like that's a round that shouldn't have been competitive, but there was a lot of like plays that the Renegades made where they were like getting away with some of the same stuff that they would get away with before. But at the end of the day, it's like, you have to look at Mouse Sports, and you have to look at the fact that like Dexter and BMAS just didn't play well at all, and they still couldn't win the game. Like that, both of those, it was like they I feel like they almost basically got 3v5'd. And at the same time, it's like they were running down the clock a lot, and Mouse Sports were just not biting. Like I remember this one round in particular where like I think it was Rops that was like a pit site crossfire, and I think it was Rops and BMAS playing pit site, and Malta was up dig, and the rest of Renegades were like execing B and throwing all their util, and Rops and BMAS just literally didn't move, and Malta was like posted moto from dig, and like any AU player runs off the site and you just kill him for free and you right back A. And literally both of these guys just did not move. And he was like, what the fuck am I looking at right now? Like he's sitting there waiting for the pick for like 40 seconds, and they just didn't move at all. And then Renegades ran into the site, and they just get crossfired pit site and die. And it's like, holy shit. Like
it's like if Renegades played the Mouse Sports who played the second half of Dust 2 yesterday, or on Nuke against Complexity, they would have been fucking fisted hard. Yeah. Let's put it that way.
I think both of the teams were like a little bit shaky. Like Alistair, like you said, didn't really play that well. I felt like he was kind of lost in that game. But then you go to the Team 1 game, and that one was just all over the fucking place. And that's why I'm saying like I have no fucking idea like what to make of it. And then you go to the VP one. Like I don't even care about the VP one, honestly. Like VP are a fucking sick team at the moment, and they're in some really good form. And I feel like in an elimination game in a tournament, you draw VP as your like opponents in the current form they're in. You've never played against their style before. I would probably just neck myself. Like honestly, like what the fuck do you do there? Like you've literally never played them, and your Kindar's just like running at you, and then the next round they're like waiting until 20 seconds to go, and like your nerves wouldn't be able to handle it, dude.
It's like VP is the complete opposite of the style of Counter-Strike you're used to if you play in Asia or in like Oceania, right? It's going to be rough. I would like to see them play in some of these snow cups, the home cups, whatever that is, where you get to play against some of these tier 2 EU teams, and tier 2 EU teams are really fucking good. They just, just that the competition is so fucking hard, they're not able to really make it to the tier 1 events. But I feel like that would give us a good gauge as to where they really stand. I agree with Pilsky that Team 1 game was all over the place. The first game was both the teams kind of, new IGLs coming in and all of that. And then VP, you can't really read much into that game.
Okay, Benkai, a couple of questions for you then. First one was, did you watch any of these games?
Nope. Okay. I was too busy building my house in Valheim, bro.
Good. More general questions then for you, as opposed to directly related to those games in specific. And I know we sort of talked about this a little bit. I feel like in your in retrospect video when you were sort of transitioning from IGL and to IGL and whatever. But the first one is like, obviously because Malta has just taken the reins within this Renegades roster, I wanted to sort of quiz you on what you thought, like how long does it sort of take to implement, A, a new player into a roster, right? Because Alice has come in, and B, how long does it sort of take to implement a new system as an IGL, right? Because realistically, they've probably had about 2 months, maybe, I suppose, with Alistair. Obviously, they haven't played any officials. This tournament was their first couple of officials. But what's your take on that? Like, how long does it sort of take to get the ball rolling with a roster like that with some changes going through? And then we'll talk about maybe how playing internationally impacts that after this.
In terms of slotting into for roles and stuff, I guess if Alistair was like a perfect fit for Dexter in terms of playstyle, I don't think it would take much for them to adjust in terms of their playstyle. But if Malta is taking over the IGL role, so maybe he might have a different style of calling as compared to Dexter, right? So maybe they would have to implement a completely different system. But given the time that they have before Katowice, I would say that they probably have to stick to their old system for the time being and not try to change up too much from what they already know, because they only have 2 months to prepare against like the world's best, and they haven't been at a LAN for like a year already. So realistically, I think any rational team would try to use the old system to see if it works first before thinking about implementing another completely new system with a new player.
It's got to be difficult when you're going against your old IGL and you're using the exact same stuff against the guy that literally made them, though.
Yeah, that's kind of true also. But I mean, you could kind of play that to your advantage also. So it's kind of like who has the bigger brains, right? But I mean, Malta won that 1v1, so I've heard. So
yeah,
he's done that to like a dad.
And it wasn't even like...
Wait, you didn't watch the game, right? So you didn't watch the 1v1.
No, but I thought
okay, don't watch it. Don't watch that 1v1. Okay, that wasn't great.
It wasn't like a quick trade.
It was like one of those moments where it's a 1v1 on a pistol round and both players just cake like 3 clips at each other and just AD everywhere and fucking reload behind cover and shit. Oh
was it like a triple? Did he fake plant like 4 times?
Something like that. I don't know. Like the fake plant and then cake multiple times.
I think it's one of those situations where you're like, fuck, it's Dexter. And then Dexter's like, fuck, it's Malta. Like, I've got to kill this guy. This is a 1v1 and he's the IGL and I'm the IGL. And it's like, you get inside your head. I don't know if that affects those guys like that, but it would for me personally if I was in that situation. The other question I had for you here, Benkai, then was, what is it like to go into international competition after playing domestically for such a long time, even like disregarding the fact that there's roster changes and whatnot? You think about how long you guys played, for example, in Boot in Asia, and then those tournaments that you went to after you started qualifying for things like Cologne and whatever it may have been, to basically go there and get wrecked. But what's like the level of competition jump from what Renegades might have been used to from playing in ANZ to then going to something like Katowice?
I think it's such a vast difference between how EU plays compared to what you're used to. Like maybe in Oceania and Asia, at least for Asia, because Asia is like a shit show, and when we go over, we're like we don't even have time to adjust to how they play, unless we actually watch a lot of VODs about them. But I mean, it's all part of the Asian CS starter pack, right? Like you play at the top level, you go over and you get fisted by EUs, and then you go back home, and then you repeat that again. But maybe for like the Oceania guys, because I kind of put them above Asia in terms of understanding the game, but maybe not on the same level of aim, like let's say like Tyloo or VG, because those guys they just do the aiming really well, right? But I'm pretty sure Oceania, they understand the game a lot better than them. So I guess they would be able to adapt to these EU teams faster than Asians. And especially if they did like their homework on them, if they watch like the demos and stuff, they'll be able to adjust to they'll be able to identify the patterns that they're doing while they're in the game and adjust accordingly. So I guess the EU, like the Oceania teams, wouldn't have to adjust that much. That's what I think. Yeah.
They might do better than the Asian teams, I suppose, in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Dexter then, because he's the other factor in all of these games that we have been enjoying. I think it was a rough start for Mouz, but they kind of came good really today. Actually, it was earlier this morning, at least for me. I was watching that game, and I thought that they would probably lose that game against Complexity. But as far as Mouz was concerned, they won against Renegades 16-14. We've already talked about that. And then Gambit, they lost to 2-1. And then they beat Complexity 2-1. So the few quick notes that I actually have here was that Dexter sort of struggled, I felt like, to find his feet maybe, which, you know, is understandable. He's in a new role in like pretty much every single map, basically. He's obviously IGLing for a new team, and he's also got some bigger stars around him, let's be real, than the ones that he had in Renegade. So maybe he doesn't need to pull his weight quite as much in that respect in Mouz as what he did in Renegades. That's maybe something that we can talk with Benkai about. But the other thing is that he went like -20 or something like that over the best of 3 against Gambit, which I don't remember the last time I really ever saw Dexter go -20. So this for me was like, okay, is this just like the way that things are going to be for him now in this Mouz roster, or is this just a transition period for him? I was interested, so I just went back and had a look, and I was like, when was the last time he actually went like double digits negative in a best of 3? And the last time he went like -20 was actually in January 2018 against Order in an IEM Katowice qualifier. So it was that long ago. That's like the level of consistency that he's had within ANZ, and even when he's gone internationally previous to this. So I think that was just sort of a bad run of form maybe for him to start things off in Katowice. But obviously, if we take a look at what happened then at that Complexity game, he seemed to really be a lot more comfortable there. Maybe took a little bit of time to get going, but once the ball got rolling for Mouse Sports, they came really well. And that mental fortitude I thought was quite impressive. And to get a win over Complexity, right? I thought they were massive underdogs going into that game. I don't know what your guys' thoughts were on that, but that's a big upset as far as I'm concerned, and pretty good signs for Mouse Sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like working any of this stuff out, you'd have to be some kind of fucking genius or something. It's like trying to work out a conspiracy theory or whatever. It's like looking at Renegade's performance. It's like, oh, Alistair goes to an AWPA, but they had like core 3 potential or some shit. And then for like Dexter, it's like he's going on a new team, and then they just change the AWPA to like this player, and then he's playing against this other team, and JKS is playing bad, and that's the other Aussie. It's like so fucking hard, because I mean, like you talk about that last series for Mouse Sports. I don't think they should have won that. Like that should have been Complexity winning that game, and they should have been knocked out of Katowice, but they just had this fucking insane comeback on the second map on Dust 2. Like that should have been Complexity's game every day of the week. So, and then I feel like Nuke was just tilt. Like I feel like Complexity wasn't even in it on Nuke. They just full tilted and couldn't recover after dropping Dust. So it's so hard to quantify, but in terms of like Dexter's performance in particular, like it's literally exactly like you said on Twitter, like fucking hell, he has to focus on like 20 things and like adapt to a new environment very, very quickly. It's got to be fucking hard to do, and he's already like adapting pretty quickly. So,
and just want to add on to that, like people don't seem to really, like people say, oh, adapt. Just given a little bit of time, you should be able to adapt, right? It's not the same case. Like Assad brought up a very good point. Like even something as basic as call-outs, right? Dexter's been playing for Australian teams his entire career, and you have to switch the way you call out certain all maps completely. That means you got to get rid of the whatever like reflex memory you had of the maps, and you got to think about it consciously while calling against motherfucking Gambit and Complexity. It is not easy, right? It's going to take a while. And I agree with Pilsky. I felt like the tilt did happen, and of course Rob's just turning into a god in that second half, and Acorn not missing anything. But Dexter was instrumental as well. I think we're starting to frag quite a bit. I think that really helped him kind of build up his own confidence as well. Because heading into Nuke, I agree Complexity were tilted. They weren't playing like I expect to see them play. But Dexter was calling one hell of a T-side. Holy shit. Like the way he was... Okay, there's this one round where it's BlameF left alone. BlameF, we all know the guy can clutch, right? He is one of the better clutches we've seen in modern-day Counter-Strike. He's alone, Nuke, 1v2. And he's in a great position. He's waiting towards decon, waiting by the door. Mouse Sports is just around the lower bomb side. And then Dexter's like, hold on. Let's slowly walk on all the way up towards heaven. Get the bomb planted towards upper. Blame is just sitting there. He's like, I can't believe. It's one of those rounds where you're playing matchmaking. Like, motherfucking tryhards. You fucking tryhards. That's literally how good Dexter was in calling. Of course, Mouse is just popping off. Everyone is hitting the shots as well. But I feel like looking at the final game, I don't want to take that away from Dexter and Mouse. I really feel like they kind of came into their own, and it was a real test for them, Dust 2 and Nuke. And it doesn't get any easier. I mean, they're going to be facing up against whom? Is it Astralis they're playing today?
I haven't actually checked who they're playing.
I think they're playing Astralis.
Mouse, let me have a look.
Which is, well, I mean,
they're about to play Astralis
1:38
in a couple of hours.
Gambit, Complexity, and Astralis. And let's be real. I don't expect them to beat Astralis. Astralis, would be pissed off the way they lost in Blast groups just a couple of weeks back. But then again, I feel like these sort of tests are really gonna make Mouse Sports as a team with Acorn and Dexter grow exponentially faster rather than just playing in some tier 2, tier 3 online cups is happening, which a dime a dozen in EU right now. So yeah, I'm actually gonna be on the more optimistic side of things here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty fucking pumped to see those kinds of results. I know, Pilsky, you sort of said something in one of our previous podcasts about how you expected Mouse to maybe be a top 10 team in the world. And I think that this is a good early sign, like that mental resilience to be able to come back, whether or not Complexity should have closed that game out, that aside.
They should have, but yeah.
The ability to come back into that game already speaks volumes for them being maybe not necessarily a champion team, if that makes sense. They're not going to be the best team in the world, I would predict. But it means that they're going to be able to, continually challenge towards the top.
It's pretty hard not to be when you've literally got like 2 riflers in your team that just go plus 20, plus 30 like every series. It's just like fucking must feel good, man, to just have like 2 guys. So it's just like, you're going to hold this bomb site and he's going to 2K every time. All
right, Benkai, into the hot seat then for you again. Without having watched these games, I want to talk more like roles-wise and get your perspective on maybe what Dexter might be going through in this situation, right? Because you're an IGL, you're from a kind of similar region, ANZ and Asia, I sort of lumped together. And you've also got that, I mean, I don't know like necessarily how much it lines up between yourself and Dexter playstyles wise, but I always remember you being almost like a star player, one of the heavy fraggers in some of the previous rosters that you played in, which I sort of consider Dexter. He was a top fragger within Renegades and whatnot. Now he's going into a roster that has quote-unquote better players than him, right? And that seems to be similar to what you've done with this Paper Rex roster. You've sort of said in retrospect with me that you have guys like Forsaken, you've got guys like Divide that you want to be setting up now. You're happy to take more of a back seat. So do you think that's maybe something to do with like the mindset that Dexter's got here going into this international roster? Or what kind of mindset might you have if you were taking that role, if you were going to be the IGL for Mouse?
If I was put in like Dexter's position, right, I definitely feel like a degree of pressure, right? Because you're playing with all of these like top tier European players that's like in maybe top 20 HLTV, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess you feel a certain amount of pressure into whether you question yourself if you were utilizing them the way that you should when you go into that team. Like, am I going to be holding like someone like Rob's back? Or am I going to be restricting Frozen to not make his plays and stuff? So I guess maybe that's what Dexter might have felt in like his first few games, like the one that he went like negative 20, right? Maybe there was like the adjustment, that adjustment period where he's thinking like, okay, what kind of calling style should I adopt to make you guys feel most comfortable? So I think that was that transition period into that, between that game and maybe the complexity one, where you kind of slowly saw that adjustment from Dexter coming in terms of like calling and how he wants to play around the players. And in terms of fragging, I guess he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that feels as though he has to top frag every round for his team, right? He strikes me as the kind of guy that
just does it.
That just kind of goes, okay, I need to call well for my team. If the frags come to me, so be it. I'll just make sure that I kill that guy. So yeah, that's the kind of person that Dexter strikes me as. Not like the kind of guy that, oh fuck, my team isn't as good as me, I have to kill everyone for my team. Yeah, he feels like the kind of guy that's like, okay, if you're coming to me, I'm gonna kill you, and that's it. Yeah.
Do you reckon that would take a weight off your shoulders when you're playing it? Like, let's say, Renegades versus Liquid or EG back in the day, does Dexter feel like, okay, I really need to make sure that I'm getting all these frags when they come to me? But now he's in a team where he's like, well, you know what? If I'm not having a great game, these other guys are going to step up anyway. Is there an element of that as well? Like, do you feel maybe a release of pressure in that sense, right? You've talked about the pressure that might be added from playing with better players, but there is an element of releasing the pressure as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, right? Because if you go into a team where you know that everyone's just better than you, you'd be like, okay, so maybe like I can afford to make maybe a few more mistakes compared to when I was in my last team. But at the same time, when you go into like a team with all of these top tier players, right? You'll be like, oh fuck, I have to like keep up with them also. I can't just like keep slacking, Because like that's how like the CS scene kind of works. If you start slacking off and you can't that's the reality of it, right? If you can't frag as well, you're eventually gonna get benched. But
yeah, who are you talking about when you're referring to that, by the way?
No, I'm just saying that's that's like the reality of the situation, right? Like there's so many. I mean, I guess if he's at least doing his job well, it wouldn't really make that much of a difference, right? Like how like if you take like Existence back in the day, like he was doing his job well. He wasn't necessarily bringing in the frags, but
I mean,
he
look
still
at
did
Hunden
his
as
job,
well.
right?
Yeah, look at Hunden as well more recently, right? Although I feel it was a good call for him to transition into the coaching role when he was calling. Let's be real, the memes. There's a reason behind the memes. He wasn't bragging at all, but he got the best out of his players, and that's what he needed to do. So, I guess it's all about the expectations that you have from your in-game leader. And in Dexter's case, I feel firepower-wise, I really still believe he's an upgrade over Carrigan. Is he of the caliber of Carrigan when it comes to calling? No, I don't think so. Not yet, at the very least. So I'm going to give him a little bit more time before, anyone should give him a little bit more time before he can make a call on this.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm like I said, I'm pretty pumped to see Dexter being able to go overseas. He's kind of the first player from my generation of CS that I've kind of watched go from zero to hero. I suppose like Gratisfaction and Liaz, but there was always a sense of them joining an Aussie team, and it was kind of like a safety net in a way in that respect. But Dexter's kind of forging his own path, and he's the IGL. So, I mean, in my mind, he's the most exciting prospect coming out of ANZ, even including Gratisfaction and Liaz. And, we've seen Azza and JKS, what they can do, those guys aside.
Agreed.
I don't know. I feel like, it's kind of weird. Like it's kind of almost cringe in a way for me to say. Like I feel Dexter on a spiritual level because like, we've chatted and stuff. We're not great mates or anything like that. He's probably gonna watch this and be like, this guy, like, fucking get off me, dude, you clinger or whatever. But in a way, I just want to see him succeed. Let's just say that much. And I think he can. Like I genuinely think he can be one of the best players in the world, one of the best IGLs in the world. I think he's got the work ethic to do that, and I think he's got the Counter-Strike smarts to do that. I really respect him as a Counter-Strike player. And as a person, I suppose. But anyway, best of luck to Dexter. Hopefully things go well with Mouz and paves the way for some more Aussie players. So we have been really cutting through this quite slowly. So we're running a little bit overtime at the moment. So we've got a few more topics to sort of blast through. These ones maybe we won't spend quite as much time on. The ESIC ban updates. Now, we talked about this on the last podcast, Benkai. I assume you've heard about the ESIC bans that got dropped in AU. So you're all up to date on that. But the follow-up situation to this is it seems that LPL, which is one of the tournament operators here in ANZ, has followed suit with the bans. So they've basically said, okay, well, if you're ESIC banned, then you're essentially LPL banned as well, which I don't know. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on this? Because from my perspective, this might actually be a little bit against the grain in a way. But I think it's the correct decision to mirror the bans. Like, obviously, there's the discussion of whether the bans are legitimate or fair or whatever. But if ESIC is the governing body in that respect, and they are the one that should be dictating this, I think it is on the TOs to then follow suit, right? It's not the TO's responsibility to say, we agree with these bans or we don't agree with these bans. Either you're in for a penny, in for a pound, or you're not in at all, right? And I would expect, for example, someone like ESL, when ANZ Champs starts off, is going to mirror those bans as well. Like, because they are a partner or whatever. I don't know what the terminology is. I don't want to say the wrong, partner might indicate whatever. But they follow suit with ESIC, or ESIC, they're involved with ESIC in some way, shape, or form. So I expect ESL will follow. Obviously, I don't speak for ESL, so I can't say, but I assume that's going to be the case. But what do you guys think? Do you think that's the right decision from LPL to mirror those bans, or to, follow suit, or should they have gone the other way? Because it seems like the majority of the AU scene seems to think that LPL was incorrect in following E6 bans here.
It's a rough
I think
one.
context is everything, right? You can go, Bleh.
No. I just was about to say what you mentioned there. I think context is everything. There's no right or wrong here. I think it is the right call from what Jordan mentioned right there. It makes sense. But at the same time, ESIC needs to be more open and clear about the bans. Like, think of it from a player's perspective, right? Like, imagine like you're one of the guys out of the 150 who got banned. Exaggeration, obviously, not that many, but quite a few of them. And you were actually one of the ones who didn't bet, right? Who was actually innocent, and suddenly your entire potential career is just down the drain. It should never be the case. Just to catch, even if 99 players were cheating and there's one who was innocent, it should never be a blanket ban where the guy can't even appeal, because of certain barriers like the $500 required, which the kid might not have for that matter. So I agree with Jordan that LPL should side with ESIC because they are literally the only governing body we have when it comes to these sort of things. At the same time, like, ESIC, come on. I mean, you can't just like blanket ban and just forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a tangent as well. I'll bring up here, Pilsky, before you put your 2 cents in, is that on the topic of those blanket bans, and as a follow-up to what we talked about last week, where the appeals process was sort of semi-underway, it felt like, with Michael Carmody sort of working on behalf of the players. He put out an update on Twitter on the 10th of February. I don't know if the situation has changed a lot since then. He hasn't had any public updates since that point in time. So this information may be, I suppose, a little bit late, or maybe something's happened since then that we haven't heard about. But as of February 10th, it seemed that the communications with ESIC had more or less gone cold in a way, where they had sort of not necessarily stopped replying, but they hadn't been able to provide any meaningful updates. And I'll quote some of the tweets here. He says, if ESIC is unable to timely and meaningfully staff an appeal process, if they can't reply to emails by dates it sets by itself, then my expectations are that ESIC should blanket withdraw the charges. Other TOs are making, frankly, stupid decisions in this interim period. Obviously, that's referring to LPL following suit with the ban. And he also said ESIC should not start what they can't finish. Which, like, I don't disagree with at all. Although, like I said, I kind of disagree with I don't think it's a stupid decision on LPL's part. I don't necessarily disagree that the bans are not legitimate, or we probably should be seeing more evidence. But I think you kind of have to follow suit. So what do you think with that in mind as well, Pilsky? I
get the feeling that, especially with how some of the players sort of came out, that like some of the bans like might be overturned. Like, I just have a feeling that maybe some of them would be overturned. Maybe they won't be, but let's just say in some world that they do get overturned, here's basically what happens. You get banned by a governing body that you weren't super aware of the regulations on. Like, yes, there is like sort of generalized thing. You shouldn't bet if you're competing in a league or something. Maybe they weren't even competing at the time that they bet. That's all like up in the air to be determined, and for ESIC to dig into that. But in theory, let's say that they are innocent. You essentially have ESEA Premier, like for like a competition like ANZ Champs, a national championship for Counter-Strike. And then LPL mirroring the bans means you can't play in VCT or anything to do with Valorant. That's like a quarter to half a year's worth of leagues that you miss out on because a governing body that you had never like dabbled in our scene very much ever before basically banned you for something that you might not even be guilty of. Like, that's fucked. Like, we've literally had players quit and not play anymore because of the ban, whether they're innocent or not. Like, some people are just going, well, I'm not playing this season. I'm not playing Counter-Strike. Like, I can't just sit here for 3 months and 6 months and do nothing.
I guess there's an argument to be made, at least with LPL. I'm not sure if they had ever dictated prior that they were under the ESIC umbrella, if that makes sense. Like, we obviously knew that ESL and DreamHack and whatnot were in bed with ESIC, for lack of a better term. So if ESIC hands down a ban, because you've already said, like, okay, we're going to follow suit with that, you are obligated to do that as ESL. But I'm not sure that LPL ever really said, like, yeah, we're going to do it if anything ever happens, or if they ever had anything to do with ESIC. I suppose in that respect, there could be an argument to be made for the players to say, like, okay, well, you never even were part of this regulatory body, but now you're mirroring their ban, and all of a sudden we can't play even in another game. Yeah, I guess there's an argument to be made there.
I also feel like they're not, like, a lot of these guys aren't even like professional players. Like, you know, like, I don't know what Benkai thinks, but like, at least here in O's, like, these guys aren't on salaries. Like, they're just playing. They're just playing CS. Like, they're playing in a team, but like, they're just playing in ESEA Premier. Like, this isn't a professional level of competition. And then like the highest regulatory body comes and absolutely domes them. Like,
yeah, I guess. Again, it's like the. I mean, to take the cricket analogy, it's like the ICC coming and banning you from backyard cricket in a way.
Literally, like, you know, it's like you're playing at your mate's cricket club in like B grade. You're playing sport on Saturdays with your mates, and then like the professional like governing body just is like, nah, you're banned. No playing anymore. Fuck off, mate.
I'm gonna disagree with that, because I feel like if you're playing your own little cup, fine, I get it, right? But when you are gonna be playing in any event which is going to lead to a certain path, which provides a certain pathway to play at the highest levels, at least in your region or whatever, there's a certain level of responsibility, right? If you don't want to really comply with that level of responsibility, which is kind of simple, don't be an asshole, don't bet on games, don't throw games, don't cheat, basic fundamentals of anything competitive, not just esports. And if you can't comply to that, then don't fucking play. Just go play matchmaking or whatever. Don't be a part of this thing, right? That can't be an excuse. But if you're going to be participating in anything competitive in any way whatsoever, I still feel you need to comply with these small things. And I feel it's not that hard, right? I get it. You're not making money out of it. You're just like amateur players, amateur teams playing. Fair enough, but that's not an excuse to try and go around, like betting on games and whatnot in which you shouldn't be betting on. Get a fucking job in that case, right? Play it as a hobby. I used to do that as well. All of us have done it as well. So I don't think that's an excuse.
Okay. Benkai, you've been a little bit quiet. I don't know how much you really have to say on this, but you are or were a player in Counter-Strike within the ecosystem. And granted, your level of play was a little bit higher than what a lot of the affected AU players were playing in. But what's your 2 cents on this? If I don't know, like, what the comparative TO would be in Asia, but like,
it's like ESEA Open, I think.
Yeah,
like the ESEA Open Asian division. We're talking like the top, like the 10th best team, or like the 8th to 16th or something. Like, these aren't guys who actually are in pro teams or have like a chance of winning it or anything.
But I think the key point is that it's not an ESL/ESEA TO, which had already dictated that they were following suit with ESIC prior to those bans coming out. So what's your take on this? I mean, should they have been banned, or no, maybe not should they have been banned, but should the TO have followed suit with the ESIC ban? How would you feel as a player, or how do you feel as a player?
I think I kind of agree with everyone to a certain extent. Like, if I start with you, Jordan, like I do see that LPL made like a sensible decision to follow through with the ESIC bans as well. But at the same time, I don't think ESIC kept up that level of professionalism that they should have in terms of following through with the guys who claim they are not affected, that they didn't really bet on anything and they're innocent, right? So I feel that those guys must kind of be like pissed off. But also as well, I agree with Bleh in terms of no matter which kind of game you're playing, if you're going to do it competitively or if you're taking part in like a tournament or something, there has to be like a degree of ethics that you keep at that level, like it's like basic understanding that you shouldn't like already do these like betting on yourselves and stuff, like no matter what kind of tier you're playing at, even if you're like the 10th on the leaderboard in ESA or something. And yeah, I think my stand right now is I think ESIC should investigate more into the guys who claim they're innocent. LPL, I think they made a sensible decision. And also, I think all the guys who were affected, they shouldn't be surprised that they were handed this punishment, because it comes with this level of play if you're going to do it, you know.
Yeah, it's a bit of a grey area, really. And I think a lot of people are going to have differing opinions. At the end of the day, I think we can all agree on the fact that ESIC should be providing better evidence than they have, and they shouldn't necessarily be handing down that kind of punishment without being able to back it up. Whether or not the TOs following suit is a good decision or not is perhaps for greater minds than ours. We are just casters and we are just geographically challenged players. So, end of the day, we're not the ones that make the decisions. We just talk shit about it. So that's all I have to say on that topic. Anyone else, anything more to say, or shall we move on to the final couple?
ESIC, I know they're not watching this, but if you are, you can't just ruin even one player's any potential future career just in an attempt to clean out the scene. There are people who are guilty. They deserve to be banned from every game, in my opinion. Valorant, Crossfire, Free Fire, PUBG Mobile. I don't give a shit. They should be banned from every competitive esports out there. But if the person is innocent, you have no right to completely ruin his career just because you can't be asked or you don't have the manpower. So hope you're listening and hope you fix it.
You can't work for the players and fuck the players over. Although if you look at the legal system, that happens all the time anyway. So what can you do?
And can I just point out the hypocrisy where they're like, oh, there were so many top teams who were stream sniping, but hey, we're not going to ban anyone because that could kill the scene. But suddenly you talk about a bunch of players who don't belong to a top 20 team, and fuck them. You can't do that. You cannot do that. I really support ESIC for what they've done so far with Counter-Strike scene, especially in the past 365 days. The past 1 year, I think, has been great stuff coming out from them with the coaches' bans and all that. But this is not right.
It's the same thing as the TOs, though. That's what gets me. It's like it's the same thing as the TOs in the fact that they fuck up stuff to do with the small regions, like Asia regions and OS regions, and they never get very much flack for it because it's not the most competitive region. And people just go, hey, haha, Asia CS, AUCS, who the fuck cares? And then they make sure they do it right when everyone's watching, when they're watching like NA and watching, EU and stuff like that. So it's always been like that. And it turns out it's the same thing with ESIC. It's the same thing with the TOs. It's the same thing with everyone who's like super serious about esports. It's like, they're allowed to fuck up in the minor regions and people just don't care.
Yeah. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, you need the grassroots development or like the endemic development to the scene to come from within the scene as opposed to from global entities, like at the end of the day, what does ESL Global, Germany, really gain from having an Asian qualifier, an ANZ qualifier? Obviously, we have ESL Australia, that's an aside, and I think they do really good work within the region. But even like, for example, Blast, why would Blast give a shit about AUCS when their whole modus operandi is, European? Like, it just doesn't, that's why I've always said, like, if we ever really want Asia to go far or to be on the same level as those kinds of tournament operators that come from Europe, it needs to come from, it needs to be like a Chinese tournament organizer or a Singaporean tournament organizer that really gets big and is endemic within the scene and is going to be able to build it up from the ground up and understand the culture around the players, which even in itself is going to be such a difficult prospect given the fact that you have so many different cultures within the APAC umbrella. You've got China, you've got Japan, Korea, SEA, ANZ, fucking New Zealand, all this sort of shit. Like, whatever. Beside the point. And I think we're going on a bit of a tangent and we are starting to run short on time. But my final thoughts on that topic is that I 100% agree with what MJ said in the final tweet, which was ESIC should not have started what they cannot finish. So I think that pretty much sums up our feelings on the whole topic. So let's move into the roster changes. There are a few. I don't want to talk too much about these. I don't think that they're major roster changes, but they are worth mentioning. And the first one actually isn't a roster change, more so as an acquisition. Yesterday, it was actually announced that Direwolves have acquired Avant. So Avant as an organization, as I understand, no longer exists. And they've been acquired by Direwolves, which I don't know necessarily what that means for their CS team. I assume that means their CS team will now compete under the Direwolves brand, which is interesting. It's been a while since Direwolves has been involved in Counter-Strike, and they were never really a top org within Counter-Strike in ANZ, but they are one of the top orgs in ANZ. So it's kind of nice to have them back, and be interested to see what they're going to be able to do for the scene and how they're going to operate within the space. And Direwolves have just added Savage and Liki to their roster. So bit of an interesting time for that roster, which was formerly known as Avant. It's now, correct me if I'm wrong, APOC, Hazza, Sterling, Savage, and Liki. So I look at that on paper and I think it is a little bit weaker than the roster that they fielded in 2020, but I can't really speak too knowledgeably about, especially about Savage. I haven't really seen him play at all much, but Liki, we've seen around a little bit. He's been sort of floating around tier 2. What I will say is that I think it's really nice to see these kinds of players getting opportunities in the top teams. I think the strength of the top 4 in ANZ in 2021 is going to be quite a bit weaker than it was in 2020, though, just because we're seeing an exodus of at least Renegades players. Alistair's gone from Order, so they need to pull someone in. Dexter's left the scene. So there's a lot of spots to fill for tier 2 CS players to sort of move up into that tier 1 umbrella. And hopefully by the end of 2021, we're going to have that high level of competition coming back. But I think, at least to start with, it's going to be an interesting sort of period early on in the piece, for ANZ champs and the like Pilski. So have you got any 2 cents on this new Direwolves X Avant roster?
Not really. Everyone's making fun of me for leaving the room, but just wanted to say RIP. It's one of my first teams.
Yeah,
there you go. Avant-garde.
I actually have an Avant jersey somewhere as well. I think.
Really?
Yeah.
I think my Avant jersey is sitting in someone's closet and never got sent to me. So thanks for that.
Well, it's definitely not in mine. Mine has my own name on it. Yeah, but I think it's hard to sort of really make a big comment on what this is going to mean for that roster. Savage, we haven't really seen playing much, and Liki, we've only seen playing very little.
Yeah, I think Liki he's on trial with them, if I read the tweet correctly. I think he's okay. As for Savage, I think Bleh has actually seen Savage play more than we have if he got to watch some of those Perfect World games, because
I did.
It's funny, like he's like touted as an up-and-comer in AU, but we've never seen him play champs. He might have played ESEA Prem, but we don't cast that.
I think we've
never seen him play any of the qualifiers.
He just turned 16,
Yeah,
didn't
he might have been too young. You're right. Yeah, that must have been what it was.
I'm pretty sure. So it's kind of like the Vexite situation all over again. I've heard a little bit about him, but I've never really seen him play because I don't watch a lot of Tier 2 AUCS. So what do you think, Bleh? Have you got any words of wisdom?
I remember watching him play. I think it was against Order. And did he play with 2D?
Yeah, I think so.
Probably.
It was in Moop, 2D. I forgot the other 2 members of that team, but I remember that game mainly because of 2D's hair. That was my first introduction to 2D's glorious mane of... I don't even know how to describe that thing. It's fantastic. But I remember being pretty impressed with his just individual prowess. Again, nothing to stand out. I was actually impressed with the fact that they took a map off Order, if I'm not mistaken, there. And Moop was also saying, like, he's like just a bunch of young guys. We're just trying to, as an in-game leader, just trying to unlock their full potential and whatnot. So yeah, he did have some pretty decent showing, especially with taking the map of Order. But apart from that, not much I can read into it, to be honest. I feel like he could be good. I don't think he's a bad player at all. I don't think he's a bad pickup. But considering the slim pickings you have right now, I guess that's the best it can go for at the moment.
It kind of puts to bed our assumptions that we would be seeing Avant and Chiefs sort of mesh together as a roster, because we'll move into the next roster change, which is Chiefs adding a couple of players as well. So those 2 teams have remained 2 teams instead of becoming 1. And Chiefs have added Gump and Valhalla. Now, my first thoughts on this was like, wasn't that the new game that everyone's talking about, like Valhalla or Valheim or something like that? But no, it's actually a player. I've never heard of Valhalla before, so again, I don't really want to make an informed opinion on him specifically. I've seen Gump around. I think he's all right. I think he's not a bad pickup for this Chiefs roster, but overall, it's in the same vein of thought in my mind as what I said about the Direwolves roster, in that I just don't think that we're going to be seeing them at the same level of strength as what the top 4 was in 2020. So I think that'll take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I feel much the same almost about the Chiefs pickups, and I echo your sentiment that, especially when you know that like an org basically died and got transferred to a new org. I mean, I don't know what the contract situation is there, and whether they transferred the contracts across to Direwolves or the players just wanted to stay with Direwolves. But I almost feel like that is almost like the dream scenario to just merge Chiefs and Avant and make like a pretty good team that can actually contest for top of the region. But instead, I feel like all 4 of the pickups are all either just decent players that we know of, or like sort of untested, younger sort of talents. And that's the route that they've gone for both of them, which I guess is really good for the talent development. But I kind of just feel like Order is going to have their way with both of those teams in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. I think Order's probably going to dominate. Whether or not we see Renegades playing a lot in ANZ this year, I don't know. I don't have really a whole lot of information on. So if Renegades comes back, I think they continue to probably be the top dog. I think Order, in my mind, is looking like easily the strongest roster coming into the early stages of 2021. We'll see whether or not that continues. Bleh, you looked like you wanted to say something here with this Chiefs discussion. I'll give you a second. But first, I want to say we're about to move into viewer questions. We haven't actually got any viewer questions for this week. So if there's anyone in chat right now, chuck one in quickly. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. We're going to... Don't be a twat, Blair. We're gonna wrap things up if there's no viewer questions right after this. If you did actually have anything to say about Chiefs, this is the opportunity for people to use that time to think of a question quickly.
Don't have much. For me, it's more like I hope Renegades sticks around in EU for a while, right? They've been stuck in EU for such a long time, and this could be an opportunity for Order to, like you said, I think they're just gonna dominate the region right now. They were so close to upsetting Renegades a couple of times as well, so I feel like they're almost there. But then again, if Renegades do come back later in the year, I feel it would be great for the scene, right? They're going to be even more dominant than before. And I feel like it would overall just increase the level of the second best, third best teams out there. The problem for me is the fact that apart from Order, I don't really see any other team who's going to be able to compete to be a top 2, top 1 team in the region. You just don't seem to have enough up and coming talent anymore. Like when I say talent, I'm talking about of the likes of maybe an Alistair or an Inns level of a player. Everyone else seems to be kind of like, they're not bad, but they're not that good either, So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. I think it's a lot harder for me to start giving opinions on these players sort of moving up than what it used to be, because back when we were doing like CGP lands and stuff like that, that was where you would see those kinds of players playing at their first LAN or something like that. And for example, the Corvidae roster, which was like Urcast, Inns, Alistair, Gratisfaction, and Steege, would come in and get a top 4 at a LAN like that. And you'd be like, wow, these guys are fucking sick. They're going to be the next players. But we don't really have that anymore in ANZ. There aren't really like top 8 LANs. There aren't really like local LANs quite so much in that respect. There are local LANs, but they're more like pug teams playing within their regions as opposed, within their cities, I should say, as opposed to teams actually traveling to a Nats, obviously, which is what we would used to call them. So we don't really have that quite so much. Anyway, viewer questions. We've got 1 or 2 maybe. First one from Friction. This one's a very quick one for you, Bleh. When are you going to start casting Valorant in India?
Oh, once they start paying in actual money rather than, here's an onion.
I think that might be Pilski's answer for AU Valorant as well. Okay, here's a legitimate one for us from Annette Potter. Do you think... fannpotter. Do you think this time on AUCS is a rebuilding time or question mark? I suppose it's weird, because maybe for the scene as a whole... okay, put it this way. Every time I see a top team leaving, and this goes back to the likes of Vox and Immunity when they were sort of playing more overseas than they were playing domestically, I always feel like it is more of a developing time. That doesn't necessarily run hand in hand with Order. Like, for example, Order, I think they're just going to continue on the same trajectory. I don't think it's a development time for them. I think they come into this year, they are expecting to dominate, they should dominate. But for the other teams, yes, it is. So for the scene as a whole, is it a rebuilding time? Yes, and kind of no. It's kind of a weird thing, isn't it? Like, where we sort of have a smattering of older players and a smattering of newer players. There was a period in AUCS, I felt like, where it was very much just like all new players coming through. That was like 3 or 4 or maybe 5 years ago now, getting old at this point. But lately it feels like more so it's been a case of newer players joining older teams and getting that experience. So it's a 50-50 kind of best of both worlds. So I don't think we're quite on that world. Like, unless if Order, for example, were to leave and play overseas all year, then definitely. But right now, I mean, we're kind of just more of the same. I feel like it's obviously a little bit of a step back, I think, from 2020, but overall, I still think we're not in an awful place for CS in AU. What do you think, Pilsky?
I don't think rebuilding is the right word, but more of like a development stage. And I think that that's sort of been led by the top teams in the region. All of them have chosen young talents to pick up rather than cynically putting together a roster that smells like it's been burnt a little bit. To go with the burnt toast analogy, you know, whenever I see like an old CS player or something like that in one of my Valorant games, I go, does anyone smell burning? Does it smell like burnt toast to anybody? Because that's where everyone goes. But I think, you know, you look at Order, they've gone for Vexite. I was going to say Vertex. They've gone for Vertex. They've gone for Vexite. Even them, they've picked up like a relatively young player without a whole lot of experience, even though he played for Chiefs. Like he didn't even play that many games. Then Chiefs have both picked up 2 young players, and Avant have both, or Direwolves, I guess you call them now, have both picked up 2 young players. It would be so easy to just, for like Chiefs and Direwolves to just merge and just be like, let's just put together known quantities. It would be so easy to just try and poach like a 5th player that's like, you know, someone that you know, that you're experienced with, or even just try to get someone from like a ground zero or something like that that's fallen apart, like a burn or something like that. No one's, you know, gone for a known quantity in that regard. You know, so I'd say that it is like a development stage for all of this young talent to kind of get better with all of these experienced players. And it might not be super competitive at the start, but it's kind of like the way that you would start to put a bit of an injection in the arm of the whole scene to see these players get better and start to improve and stuff.
All right, I'll move on to the next question here in the interest of time. Yakum asks, thoughts on D13 playing ESEA Open in EU? And maybe this is a good one for Benkai and Bleh more so than for us. Sorry, Mac. I'll get to your question right at the end. We'll get to the shit post questions after the more serious questions. Yeah, so what do you guys think about D13 playing in EU? I'll just quickly say they are 8 wins, 1 loss in Open Division, which is pretty good. But I mean, obviously, it's Open Division.
It's open. Division. It's open.
But this is an Asian CS team. Let's just put it out there.
I would rather they play Open EU than play Asia Invite, to be right.
Can I just say, there's like, I'm just scrolling down the list. There's like 700 plus teams in Open Division for EU, which is fucking insane.
I wonder how much ping they're getting to EU though.
Like 150 plus.
That's normal for Mongolians. They're used to it.
No wonder no one gives a shit about AUCS when you can barely put together like 30 teams for ESEA Open in Asia. When EU's getting 700 plus teams. I mean, that just like, when I first saw that, I was looking at this actually a couple of weeks ago. I saw that, I was like, holy shit. Like, no wonder. You know? What do you think, Benkai?
I think, yeah, I mean, if they really want to like make it far, I think starting there is a good place. It's like a good place to start. But if you take into consideration like the ping and stuff, I don't think they would like realistically make it all the way to the end. But I guess they would come out a better team in the end because of like the kind of opponents that they face. Like there's maybe a lot more stuff to learn there compared to Asia. I mean, sure, like Asia is like it's fairly easy to win and stuff, but you don't really get anything out of it, you know. So I guess you can kind of see that the D13 guys want to like really take it more seriously, and they're starting with going to EU, which I think is like the first step. But maybe realistically, once this like pandemic blows over, they could actually move there to start practicing and stuff. I think that's where they can really start improving.
Okay. We've got 2 more questions. I'm going to cut it off here because we are, you know, ready to go to bed, I think. The final serious business one from FrogWithDanishO, who is our #1 Patreon. We love that guy.
Frog.
He wants to know, who does Benkai look forward to facing in Valorant? Could be SEA Asia or even international teams.
I'm even going to piggyback on this one after.
Okay.
I mean, of course, I mean, of course, Vision Strikers, because they're arguably the best team in the world right now, right? So I would look forward to facing them, and I would say that it isn't that far-fetched because we are in the region where we can actually practice these guys, and those guys are the guys that we actually talk to while we were still playing CS, like Stacks and stuff we're on good terms with. We still like talk shit with him and stuff. So it wouldn't be that much of a pipe dream to be able to face them. Like we could scrim them, but maybe in an official, I don't think it would be that soon.
Okay.
And I'm going to piggyback on that because I wanted to ask you, the meme is that I love Thai CS and I'm obsessed with it. That's the classic meme. So I'm going through the leaderboards and I'm seeing, fucking PTC, John Olsen. I'm seeing all the boys up there. What's going on with Thai Valorant? Have you played any scrims against those boys and are you scared of them?
I have. Like, the scrim I was playing just now, the one that caused me to be late for this one, it was against the currently top team in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
And they were... I wouldn't say I would be scared of them. Like, it's just part of that adjustment period of knowing how teams play according to like their compositions and stuff. And I would say that we are not that far from them in terms of catching up.
Okay.
So maybe Thai Valorant might be, because they're still kind of playing. It's very aim heavy for Valorant.
Yes.
Yeah, like even in Valorant, they still have like their executes, right? But they still rely a lot on just like going for the aim duels against you and just like shooting you in the face. But yeah, that for me that has always been their strength in both CS and Valorant.
So it's not going to be like 2018 where Singapore started to lose to to Thailand over and over and over and over and over again. You're expecting to be better than them.
I mean, you can't really classify me as Singapore anymore, right? Because I've like...
I guess, yeah, you are more of an ESEA team now, I suppose.
Yeah, but I mean, in heart, we all know that it's still a Singaporean team, right? So...
Well, it's a Singaporean org, Singaporean IGL. I mean, what more do you really want at that point? Anyway, that's the end of the episode. Thank you guys for watching.
Wait, what about Max question? Max question. Come on, man.
Fuck, shows how much I really respect that guy. Anyway, can't wait to see him casting some new esports titles in the near future. Look, what does Mac want to know? He wants to know, how much does Benkai like eggs and how's he have them?
I mean, I fucking love it, man. I even I spoke to Jordan and I made him make like a tier list of eggs, and he had scrambled, right? Scrambled was S tier.
S tier for me, yeah.
Okay, for me, my S tier would be, of course, like poached eggs, because that's like eggs Benedict style, right? And
man.
Omelets. Okay, omelets are at S tier. And B would be soft boiled.
You skipped A tier.
Oh,
yeah, there is no A tier in eggs.
There's no A tier.
Okay, scrambled eggs would be A tier. Scrambled, yeah.
Okay.
Scrambled, soft boiled. B would be hard boiled, and
what about
sunny
fried?
side up.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, and I guess I'll put raw eggs at E.
Raw eggs. What about fish eggs? That was one of the ones that got asked to me in that stream as well.
All right. I mean, if you have it on sushi, it's really good. I mean, for me,
Fish
at
eggs are
least.
great.
Yeah. I'll put it on A if
What about
it's in.
human eggs?
I don't think you're supposed to eat those, Blair. All right. Anyway.
All right, let's close the show.
Let's close the show. I'm going to close the show with a controversial thing, and that is that I don't actually like omelets. So thanks, guys, for watching. For real this time.
Hire us.
Hire us. That's what Blair says. Pilsy says, I want to cast some EU Valorant. I like StarCraft, and I want to do EU CS. Thank you. And Benkai says, fuck CS. I want to kill it. Valorant for life. So, yeah, fuck you too, Blair. And Benkai. I don't know why I said Blair, but especially fucking
It's
Blair.
fine. I love you.
It comes naturally.
I love you.
It does just come naturally.
Fuck you, Blair. Oh, fuck you too, Jordan. All right,
Yeah.
GG.
All right, that's the end of the show. Thanks, guys, for watching. Make sure you leave a comment with a question for us for next week, because we need that for the interaction on the YouTubes. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to follow on Twitch. If you're watching on Twitch, make sure to follow on YouTube. Support us on all the Patreons, Twitters, all that sort of shit. They're all down there. Thank you guys, and see you next time.
Wasting time.